on my right by Councilmember Lewis, to my left by Councilmember Dozier. We will soon have a quorum. We'll go ahead and get started with public comment, right? Because we need a quorum to adopt the agenda and all that, right? Yeah, so we'll start with public comment. Mr. Johnson, if you could call folks up, that'd be great.
First speaker is Jennifer Brooks.
Hello. Okay, thank you. I'm Jennifer Brooks. I live downtown, and I'm speaking to Resolution 22-R-4521 about the shared dockless mobility devices. I understand this resolution was requested by the vendors, and all of the vendors are operating in violation of the requirements of their permits. One of those requirements is that the vendors are supposed to prepare reports in a timely manner and submit them to Department of Transportation. There have been no reports, at least none that I can find, since a brief little addendum to in March 2021. So we have no idea how these programs are working. In the whereas paragraph, it says that the city has progressively improved micromobility infrastructure, so they should be safer, but I don't see any of those improvements in the Central Business District, which is where I live. I don't see any of these devices being used for commuting of the workforce in the Central Business District. I see it only as an entertainment commodity, and I don't really think that the city needs to support a program in the Central Business District that's not going to be helpful to the people who actually are working there. There's no obvious enforcement by anybody of any of the legal driving requirements of these vehicles. They're still on the sidewalks. They're still being thrown in bushes. They're still harassing pedestrians and other users of the sidewalks. So as long as the vendors are not enforcing what they have to, I can't see why we're giving them more time in the darkness of night in my neighborhood. So I would just ask you all to please always consider the Central Business District as a unique place because of the needs of who is there. So the conventioneers are not using scooters, they're walking and talking, and they're just so happy to be with people. They're not going to be scooting to and from the Congress Center. The workforce is not using them to commute. And above all, they're not being used lawfully in the Central Business District. They are a harassment and they impinge on the quality of life in the Central Business District. So please do not give them more time. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Kevin Ross. As Mr. Ross comes to the podium, I'll acknowledge my colleagues, Councilmember Juan and Overstreet, who have arrived. We now have a quorum. Mr. Ross, the floor is yours, 2 minutes.
Good morning. I am here today representing Atlanta Checker Cab and the taxi cab industry drivers and owners and seeking some changes to update 2 provisions of the city code that deal with taxi cabs. The theme of this legislation is kind of leveling the playing field and changing some things that will do that. Councilman Michael Bond is the author of the legislation, and I understand that he will appear this morning to speak on its behalf. The first section that we're changing is in Chapter 22, which is the ground transportation at the airport. We are redefining taxi meters to include digital devices. That's the world we live in, but the ordinance has never caught up. We are having the age limit for ground transportation vehicles go back to 10 years, which it was a few years ago. We think in light of, among other things, the pandemic and the cost that has imposed on the industry and the great amount of competition, that this would be a reasonable change. And we're also eliminating inspections as a prerequisite to getting ground transportation permits. Other categories of vehicles for hire don't have to do that, and we don't think cab should have to do it either. In terms of Chapter 162, which is the Vehicle for Hires Code, one, we want to eliminate the CP&C renewal fee at $100. Again, another cost that we think is just kind of antiquated. We are proposing changes to the fare structure. And one of the things we're looking at has not been a change, we think, in 15 or 20 years. We want the drop rate, the first eighth mile, to be $3.50 rather than $2.50. Additional eighth mile, 30 cent rather than 25, and an hourly wait time, 24 rather than 21. We also want to eliminate the flat rate zone fares from the airport to Midtown, downtown, or Buckhead. Rideshare vehicles aren't subject to those flat rate zones, and sometimes that's a competitive disadvantage for taxi cabs. Finally, we want to get rid of some of the old requirements, like all the vehicles have to be painted the same, dome lights on top. Those things are not things that ride shares have to do. And in this day and age, we want to equate it to state law, which basically says you ought to have sufficient identification that you can be visible from 50 feet in terms of your company affiliation, et cetera. So we think these are reasonable, necessary, and timely changes, and understand a substitute ordinance will be submitted this morning for what you've been holding in committee that would reflect these changes. Thank you.
Thank you. Musa Idris is next on the list. Musa Idris, you're next, sir. Would you like to speak? You signed up, or maybe if you signed up thinking you were just signing up to put your name down, you don't want to speak. Okay. Rick Hewitt. Oh.
Good morning. My name's Rick Hewitt. I'm the president of Checker Cab here in Atlanta. We're enjoying our 75th anniversary this year of serving Atlanta. I have been the president there for about 30 years and worked there 40 years. I'm also a member of the Transportation Alliance, which is an international ground transportation organization that's 100 years old. We've been members for over 50 years. So I have an international perspective of the taxi industry. I know most of the operators around the country and around the world, actually. And the rate that we're asking for that Kevin mentioned to you is a rate that many cities around us have had for several years now. And of course, all of those cities are looking to get a raise also. So this raise would put us up to par with a lot of the cities that around us that we compete with now. Now, once they get their rate increase, we'll still be lower than everyone else. And that's pretty much it as far as the rate increase. The other things are to help us compete with our competition, which is rideshare and limousines. The airport is obviously part of that. The airport requires us to go and be inspected. They don't inspect rideshares, they don't inspect limousines. So I don't know why taxi cabs are different. We actually don't get a lot of complaints. We have a great record from that standpoint. And plus, at the airport, we have a taxi staging area. That taxi staging area, drivers wait sometimes 4, 5, 6, 7 hours waiting on fares. So they have a captive audience. They can randomly inspect those vehicles anytime they want. And write them tickets, give them a chance to resolve any issues they may have. The process for inspecting vehicles is very convoluted. They only do it once a month, which really puts us at a disadvantage of hiring drivers, and hiring drivers right now is a real challenge. We operate about 30 or 40 cabs now. We used to operate a couple of hundred. Obviously, the rideshare onslaught has cost us a lot of business. But we're still here. We've survived Uber and Lyft. We've survived the pandemic thus far. But a lot of companies didn't. A lot of companies went out of business. Atlanta Lennox, Buckhead Safety, a lot of big companies could not survive all of this. The companies that are left, there used to be 1,550 cabs in the city and drivers to drive them. Now I bet we're less than 500. The city needs taxi cabs. The city needs taxi cabs at the airport. We've talked to the airport manager. He doesn't have problems with these changes. All of the
Thank you, Mr. Hewitt.
that you're fixing to get went through the city attorney's office. She didn't have a problem with it.
Mr. Hewitt, your time's expired. Thank you for
Yep,
coming
okay.
in today for public
Thank
comment. Thank you. I have a number of folks who've signed in by hand. I'll do my best to pronounce your name correctly. If you'd like to speak, please come forward. If not, this was the sheet that you may have signed. If you just signed in thinking you were signing in to the meeting and you don't want to speak, just let me know. If you do want to speak, please come up and you'll have 3 minutes. Tesfaye Kalaite. And I'm sorry, the gentleman's name in the back is? Jonas Sharmak. You want to come on up? Yeah, 6 minutes.
Hi, good morning. My name is Jonas Sharmak. I'm a Tax Association president. I'm glad we've been here today. And basically, we are here to supporting what our lawyer talked about, Kevin Ross and Rick, and asking them, we've been suffering last 3 years about COVID, and our business pretty much is gone. So now we set a meeting with the airport general manager, and we had a good meeting with them, and I met his deputy management. So we're all the same page and asked them, hey, we definitely need help. So that's why we requested, age limited from, pretty much 7 to 10 years. So we don't want to every 6 months come over there and ask you guys, give us an extension. So pretty much we've been traveling different city like Chicago, Minneapolis, New York, and we were doing it. I asked them how this operating at the airport, and pretty much they do from 10 years. Some of them Minneapolis, they do 15 years after the COVID happened. So our financial, honestly, we're burning, lost it a lot of revenue. And we have a challenging with the Uber, Lyft, the other shareholders. So we came here today and supporting, honestly, helping us this major issue. And then other rate issue, yes, we need help because a lot of confusion is going on. Pretty much people going to say we're going to go to Buckhead, and then they take here Lennox, Roswell, Uyukum, and they say, no, Mom, it's not, this is boundary for flat rate zone. So it's a lot of kind of confusions going on between the consumer, the drivers. So I'm personally supporting, checking out those confusions going on. They say they go to Midtown, they pretty much going to the Buckhead zone. So there's a lot of confusions going on that one. So we're asking them, honestly, take care of that one and eliminate it for the flat rate zone at this time. And actually, other things we're trying to ask them when you inspect the vehicle, sometimes we're sitting here 2 or 3 weeks waiting to go to airport, approve it, they do twice a month. So that one, we're trying to be, honestly, change it and give the authority with the company owners. That's the people who work together. And if they inspected the vehicle, look at the car is clean, now it's in requirement, then we go through from over there. Because right now, if you bought a car, you're gonna wait like 2 or 3 weeks sometimes. Sometimes they send the money at the airport and they say, oh, we don't receive it on time. Then send you back, you might sit at home. Even though you bought a new car, you're gonna wait it in like 4 weeks, 3 weeks sometimes. So at that times, we're trying to give the power of attorney with the company owners and work together. And anything's at the airport, we can work it out. There's a lot of other issues going on there, but we hopefully waiting to the airport management team. We sit down together, we discussed it, all other issues we have it to work it out. I had a good faith, the new management team to have the airport to work with us and have several other meetings coming up and fix it with the issue. And we agree a lot of stuff, maybe we disagree something. But we're here today, you guys, and helping us. Honestly, financial, we're burning. And honestly, we ask you guys, a lot of issue right now, we brought it, is helping us, the industry. Because right now, only things mostly cab drivers make a living at the airport. Pretty much the city is chaos, is gone. So Uber Unlimited, there's no age limited. The only thing is right now, the age limited is when you work at the airport. So that's why we are here today, and other fellow cab drivers will speak behalf it. We 100% is, asking you guys to support us, to especially the age limited from 7 to 10 years, eliminated the flat rate zone. And if you own the CB's number, they're saying it used to be $100 a year, and it's not valid no more. Basically, remove that one is a good thing. In the zone, all other issue is going on. It's great. Airport coming up, other idea. They saying they're gonna go to different city, their own to figure out, discover how the other airport, like big airport like Chicago, Los Angeles, Vegas, how they operate it. And I said, okay, you guys gonna go over there to look at. It's good. So basically what we're hoping today is in a JVIT here, and all of us with here, you guys to listen to us and honestly to helping us, those issues, you guys have the copy, and that's what I'd like to add it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. George Sita.
My name is George Sater. I'm one of the taxi driver. I've been driving since 1981, and I've also been a taxi training instructor for 20 years until recently when things fell apart due to pandemic, and I'm still driving. What I'm talking about here right now today is, please, we need equal level playing field in this industry. And as a matter of fact, as all we know that taxi cab services has been a traditional services of ground transportation here for years. And as such, therefore, we owe taxi cab a great deal of respect in terms of transporting people from point A to point B. All that has been spoken here regarding the situation in which we are going through, we have been hit heavily by the pandemic. Now, we should not also forget what the council has done for us, because the council has been considerate, really considerate, in the point that they gave us an extension. Now, the two subjects that we are talking about here is the rates that has been, completely stagnant for 15 to 20 years. And if there can be adjustment, it would be highly appreciated. And also, what actually we are suffering from out here is during the pandemic, when the manufacturers could not produce enough vehicle to go out in the field, it causes a great deal of shortage in the marketplace. And therefore, that has caused a lot of, the price being jacked up, and therefore the drivers cannot physically afford the prices that have been inflated. As you can imagine, a car which was sold 6 years ago for $6,000 is now selling for $12,000. Now that is very unreasonable, and therefore that's what the drivers were asking for, that if this car age limit could be considered, instead of 7 years to be made 10 years car age limit. That would be highly appreciated. But we are providing a very distinguished and compromising service of taxi cabs transportation in this city. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next person up is Sufyan Abdi.
Good morning. My name is Sufyan Abdi, and I'm here to talk about the issue of the taxi drivers' car age limit and issues like that. And all we're asking you right now is, because of the problems we have, income-wise, everything, we ask you to replace the 7-year car age limit at the airport to 10 years. As a matter of fact, for the last 4 years, we've been trying to come up with the new cars, as been asked by the airport. None of us could come up with the airport requirements to buy a car age limit every 2-3 years. So here, when income went down from us, because rideshare, Uber, Lyft took over a lot of business, we don't have any business in downtown. Buckhead is gone from us. And the airport we lost for them a lot of business for ride shares. So for us to be required to come up with 7-year car age limit is a loss. The first time this requirement passed at this city hall, we lost 800 drivers right away. We were 1,600. Now what's left is 300, because anytime that time comes for me to buy a car, there's no money for me to buy it. Because the income we're generating over there is not, we cannot afford to buy every 2-3 years a new car. So what we're asking you to make it 10 years is because simply we will have more time to save money to buy the car and continue to work at the airport. Right now, if I'm driving 10 years or a car that's like 7 years now, I have no penny to go get another car. Cars now are very, very expensive to buy because of the COVID, because there's no much production that's for the last 2 years. Now the same car I bought like 5 years ago for $4,500, they're asking me for $12,000. And I don't have one penny to get that. And a lot of colleagues that are here have the same problem. Please, we ask you, we beg you to reconsider, replace the 7 years with the 10 years, and we will appreciate your help. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Yared Elamayahu. Not here. Okay. And we've already heard from Musa Idris. I'm sorry? Mr. Ross, you've already had your 3 minutes. I apologize.
I just want to say that we have a number of drivers here, and in the interest of time, we basically decided to cut off our comment at this point.
Okay, just for clarity and thoroughness, to make sure that someone signed up here who's not a driver, I'll read some names, and if anyone who is not a driver who wants to speak, who signed up, please come forward. Samuel Sambaso, Kashai Kidani. Nope. Okay. Biru Tedesi. Yep. And Bamidine Ibrahim. Nope. All right. Thank you. We will now turn to a few items that we skipped because we needed a quorum. We will start with the adoption of the agenda. Could I get a motion to adopt the agenda as stated? Second. Motion by Juan, second by Dozier. Please open the vote on the adoption of the agenda.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. The agenda is adopted.
Motion to approve the minutes by Juan, second by Dozier. Please open the vote on the motion to, on the adoption of the minutes.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. The minutes have been approved.
Perfect. Next, we have presentations. Typically, we would have a scheduled presentation from ATL DOT. They've requested to move their presentation to our November 16th meeting, so they will present their quarterly report on November 16th. We do today have a communication, section G, that is an audit report, so we'll move to that section, and I believe it's Daniel Hampton, chair of the audit committee, or someone from the audit committee to present a presentation on the Special Services District audit.
Mr. Chairman, I sound the caption.
Please do.
Item number 1, 22C5170, a communication from Daniel Hampton, Chair, Audit Committee, submitting the performance audit report, Beltline Special Services District, Financial Review 2022.
Please introduce yourself. The floor is yours.
In March 2021, the Atlanta City Council approved an ordinance which created the Beltline Special Service District and required the city auditor to provide a financial review of the district every 2 years. This is our first review. We would like to give special thanks to the staff of the Atlanta Urban Redevelopment Agency, Atlanta Beltline Inc., and city debt staff for their cooperation and assistance throughout the audit. We also thank Dr. Bart Hildreth, Professor Emeritus at Georgia State University, who provided subject matter expertise on this. The Special Service District was created to help fill the funding gap. Projections showed that the Beltline tax allocation district would not produce the full $350 million needed to complete the Atlanta Beltline Trail. Exhibit 2 on this slide, which is on page 3 of the report, shows the funding sources used to make up the $350 million gap. The TAD and philanthropic contributions were estimated to contribute $100 million. The Beltline Special Service District was created to provide another projected $100 million. Beltline administrators then planned to leverage this $300 million total between the TAD, the philanthropic contributions, and the Special Service District to apply for federal and state funding to finance the remaining $50 million. The Beltline Special Service District is a targeted tax district in which commercial, industrial, and multifamily property owners pay additional property taxes to fund trail completion. Activities within the Special Service District are managed by several entities which are affiliated with Invest Atlanta. The relationships between these entities is shown by the graphics on this slide, which are from page 4 of the report. The Atlanta Development Authority, or ADA, and the Atlanta Urban Redevelopment Agency, or AURA, do business under the Invest Atlanta trade name, but are separate legal entities. Atlanta Beltline Inc., or ABI, is a subsidiary of ADA. AURA issued a $95.1 million bond in 2021. The bond is for 30 years with an option to prepay beginning in 2027. The general rules are that AURA issued the bond, ABI spends the proceeds, and ADA provides oversight and support. The bond includes a discretionary fund. AURA issued the bond for less than the amount needed to complete the project, as shown in the graphic on this slide, which is from page 5 of the report. If the tax generates more revenue than needed for a given year's bond repayment, AURA can move the excess tax collections to a discretionary fund. From the discretionary fund, AURA can use the excess collections to pay for project costs or, after 2027, to repay the bonds early. The discretionary fund allows AURA to raise the full $100 million needed. Money in the discretionary fund can be used for any project-related costs, unlike money from the initial bond proceeds, which are limited to certain allowable expenses. Additionally, ABI can only spend bond proceeds in the area where the Special Service District and another district called the Urban Redevelopment Area Number 1 overlap. About 25% of the special district parcels fall outside of this overlap. However, ABI can spend discretionary fund money here and other funding within the part that is outside of the overlap. Exhibit 7, which is from page 6 of the report, shows that $73.9 million in bond proceeds remained as of June 2022. The entities had spent $15.9 million and set aside $5.3 million of the bond proceeds as of June 2022. Most of these expenses were to reimburse previous Beltline Trail costs. $3.5 million of the $15.9 million were spent on new project expenses. Our objectives were to ensure that the Special Service District's governing entities had controls in place to ensure that spending complies with program mandates and is accurately reported, progress in meeting the Beltline Special Service District program objectives, and adequate debt service coverage and timely repayment. We found that the governing entities lacked a shared understanding of bond requirements, that legal documents for the district established some financial and programmatic controls, and that the governing entities should update their written policies and procedures. Governing entities lacked a shared understanding of bond requirements. We found that staff provided information on bond processes and roles that contradicted the bond documents and each other in some cases. There was no single document with all criteria, roles, and responsibilities clearly documented. Some of the contradictions included lack of clarity around the difference between AURA's and ADA's role, some staff who were unfamiliar with the bond requirements, such as the discretionary fund, even after funds had already been spent, staff who provided conflicting guidance on length of time to transfer tax collections, and the process for ORA to submit its reimbursement requisitions was unclear. There is also a potential risk of excess tax collections. ORA can use these excess collections to allow ABI to pay for extra project costs, or ORA can use the excess collections to pay off the bond early and end the tax. To mitigate the risk of excess collections, City Council can change the Special Service District tax rate. However, ORA's and ABI's current reports to Council do not include enough detail for City Council to make this decision. We did find that the bond and other governing documents contain requirements that help address bond administration, mitigate the risk of unallowable expenses, limit the possibility of missed bond payments, and reduce the risk of insufficient funds to repay the bonds. These requirements also help to reduce direct liability to the city as well as to ORA and to ensure proper financial reporting. These include a process for requisition approval, a coverage ratio that excess collections must meet in order to be transferred into the discretionary fund, a revenue deposit schedule, a debt service reserve fund, and council's ability to change the tax rate. ORA's and ABI's policies and procedures contain several controls, but had some gaps on how each would meet the bond requirements. We compared both entities' policies and procedures with bond documents and assessed them against the control activity categories from the GAO's Green Book, a standard for designing and evaluating internal controls. ABI spent $14.2 million as of June 2022 and had not yet completed written policies and procedures for activities within the Special Service District. Also, its chart of accounts did not clearly separate Special Service District financial information. However, ABI was working on both of these during our audit. ORA developed district-specific policies and procedures that contain most control activities and bond requirements during our audit, but they were missing procedures for some key bond activities, such as ensuring ABI submitted only allowable expenses. Both entities could also strengthen internal controls within the policies and procedures. We had 4 recommendations from this audit, and management agreed with all 4. We made all 4 recommendations to the city's Chief Financial Officer, or CFO, and Chief Operating Officer, or COO, due to our reporting structure. Number 1, we recommend that the city's CFO and COO ensure that ORA, ABI, and relevant city staff work with legal staff to create a memorandum of understanding. This memorandum should document and clarify roles and responsibilities of the parties and processes for handling financial transactions, including reimbursement of project-related costs, issuance and administrative fees, and bond repayment. Number 2, we recommend that the city CFO and COO ensure that ABI and ORA update their written policies and procedures to include specific Special Service District language detailing how they will comply with bond requirements. Number 3, we recommend the city CFO and COO ensure that ABI updates its chart of accounts to account for Special Service District financial information separately. And number 4, we recommend the city CFO and COO lay out a reporting framework for ABI and ORA in the Memorandum of Understanding. These reports should be considered over the life of the bond to ensure that ORA can continue to meet bond payments. This framework should include tax collections compared to projections over the life of the bond, total bond funds spent to date, percentage completion for projects funded by the Special Service District, and total amount in the discretionary fund for prepayment and for project costs, along with the amount and type of expenses. To see the full report, please go to the website link listed. Thank you for your time and consideration during this presentation. Any questions?
We have a question from Councilmember Alex Warren.
Thank you, Councilmember Lewis, and thank you for the report and the audit. I'll admit I was not here on council when the SSD was created, so I'm going to ask a couple of questions that are pretty basic operational ones. So I don't know if it's you, or I understand that there are some Beltline folks here that, so whoever can field these. So first off, the question you talked about the bond proceeds that ORA issued and the discretionary fund. If I understand what you said, the discretionary fund is essentially populated by excess tax collections above what was projected and what is used to in the original bond. Is that correct?
That is essentially correct. So the discretionary fund is something that ORA can choose to move funds into if there are excess tax collections above and beyond what is the coverage factor. So 110% of the debt payments for that year and I believe the next scheduled year. If it is over 110%, they can move into the discretionary fund, and from there, they can choose to repay the bond early, starting as of 2027, or pay for other project costs.
And that's the only source of funds for the discretionary fund, like or it can't then put in additional money that it finds like in a sofa cushion.
I believe so. That is my understanding. If anyone from
Mr. Neighbors, we meet again.
Good morning, Ken Neighbors, McGuire Woods, outside counsel to Atlanta Beltline, and I was the bond counsel on this transaction. There's no other source of funding, right? It's just basically it's a catchment fund, bottom bucket, and it allows for those funds to be redeployed only for the Beltline Trail.
Okay, now, what I also heard is that that the discretionary fund can be applied to any project costs outside of versus the net bond proceeds. There's a little more restriction on it. But is there flexibility about the geography of where those funds can be applied, or do they still need to be within the ORA footprint?
The funds in the discretionary fund are free and clear to be used throughout the SSD area.
Okay, and outside of the ORA footprint?
Outside of the URA footprint, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. And then in terms of the bond proceeds that remain as of June, the prior TAD expenses of $10.7 million, what was that for?
If you give me a moment, I'll look that up. We did find in the initial bond issuance that it was legally allowed for them to be able to reimburse prior expenses.
Yep.
So it was primarily for design and consultation expenses for parts of the South Side and West Side trails.
All right, so we've spent down essentially 16 million, something like that. It sounds like most of that had been in soft costs. Is that a fair assessment?
I believe so. Some of the restrictions, I think it was from Treasury, perhaps. Is that correct? There were some restrictions on paying earlier construction expenses.
Yeah, so customarily in the bond world, to issue bonds on a tax-exempt basis, you must pass an official intent resolution. That allows you to go back in time and recapture advanced costs, architecture, engineering.
And I apologize, can you announce who you are? When new speakers come up, can you announce who you are?
Again, Ken Neighbors, McGuire Woods, bond counsel and special counsel to ABI. So at the end of the day, given the timing of the deal, we anticipated closing in March or April-ish. Obviously, that didn't happen. We closed in December. And so ABI wanted to continue the planning on the Southwest segment, et cetera. That's really the first package of projects that I think are slated for the big funding, so to speak. And so to recover those advanced costs, they took a drawdown at the closing.
No, I get that piece. I guess I just want to make sure. I mean, we've had the SSD we've been collecting for a year. Or well, we've issued the bonds, and it feels like the first 10-15% have just gone to soft costs versus actual implementation.
Yeah.
Does that match up with the overall $300 million project budget for all the trails, so we're not pushing ourselves into not having enough money for actual construction?
That is my understanding. This is really a supplemental funding tool. So when you look at the philanthropic monies, which matched the bond proceeds, when you look at the TAD money, and you look at the T-SPLOS and other sources of funding, all that together is anticipated right now to fund the completion of the trail. That takes into account the administrative costs.
Okay. And we're still good with the $350 million budget for completion of the trail, as far as.
So, no deviations yet, but we'll pay attention.
Okay.
I just wanted to note that, thank you for that. The reimbursement costs were to reimburse the TAD, so the TAD would now have more funds available.
Gotcha. That's fair. Okay. Now into the findings. So this is probably going to be more specifically around with you. Slide 7, legal documents establish some financial and programmatic controls. Did you find some, obviously is not all. And so of the ones that were not included in the sum, were there any material gaps in terms of financial programmatic controls that you found?
We did not necessarily find any material gaps of anything that you would expect to see in bond documents that were not there. And we did want to give credit to the entities for, protecting the city's liability, ORA's liability, et cetera. We wanted to be clear about the sum in terms of not contradicting the other findings where you wouldn't necessarily expect this to be in the bond documents, but not all of the roles and responsibilities being particularly clear.
Continuing on, you were talking about some of the documents didn't have controls over unallowable expenses. Did you find any in the analysis of expenditures that were not contemplated as allowed?
We did not. There have not been an awful lot of expenditures just yet, but of the ones that we reviewed, so that was mostly the reimbursements, and there were about $3.5 million in new project expenses. We did not find any that were unallowable.
And regarding you say the current reports don't include enough detail in case council needs to deliberate an adjustment to the tax rate. What additional data points were missing or that would be relevant?
Sure. So let me find the exact page of the report, but we actually have a table that compares the current reporting with what we believe is necessary for City Council to make that decision. That is on page 18 of the report, Exhibit 10. So a lot of this also circles around the fact that the existing requirements for Invest Atlanta to present cover the TAD and do not specifically include the SSD. So some of this is more to just ensure, particularly if there are future council members or future Invest Atlanta staff, that these are incorporated. I will also note that the voluntary continuing disclosure agreement contained in the bond documents does cover nearly all of the things that we provide in the recommendation, such as, comparing tax collections to projections, the status and uses of discretionary fund. However, the voluntary continuing disclosure agreement is not something that the city can enforce, and ORA is not liable if they do not provide it. So because this was a private placement memorandum, it's not subject to the same disclosure requirements that the SEC has of public placements.
I take a lot of solace and comfort in the fact that everybody agreed with the recommendations, and I think it's always good to do this early on in the process so we can do a quick reset. It sounds like a lot of it's just procedural rather than anything material, and so I again appreciate the investigation and report, and I again appreciate the fact that everybody is on board with the recommendation. So I yield. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Move to accept and file. Is there a second? It's been moving properly second. Will you please open the vote?
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 4 yeas, 0 nays. This item is accepted and filed. This takes us to section H, ordinance for first reading. Item number 2, 22-01807, an ordinance by Transportation Committee authorizing the mayor or his designee on behalf of the Atlanta Department of Transportation to accept grant funding from the Georgia Department of Transportation for the Westlake Avenue Bridge Replacement Project. PI number is listed to amend the fiscal year 2023 intergovernmental fund budget by adding to anticipations and appropriations in the amount of $942,800.00 to enter into any necessary agreements with the Georgia Department of Transportation for grant acceptance and participation and for other purposes. Item number 3, 22-01808, an ordinance by Transportation Committee waiving the Code of Ordinance source selection provisions contained in Chapter 2, Article 10 of the City of Atlanta Code of Ordinances, authorizing the mayor or his designee to execute Amendment number 2 to the airport use and lease agreement with Delta Airlines Incorporated that allows the surrender and addition of certain space on Concourse D for design and construction of an airline club and certain design and construction work for Concourse D widening at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, authorizing the reimbursement to Delta Airlines Incorporated in the amount not to exceed $166 million and 0 cents. All contract work will be charged to and paid from account numbers listed herein and for other purposes. This takes us to our regular agenda, Section I, ordinance for second reading. Item number 4, 22-01782, an ordinance by Transportation Committee amending the FY 2023 capital budget for various capital funds and the aggregate amount of $1,928,800 $56.86 to transfer appropriations from completed, canceled, realigned, or postponed projects at Hartsfield Jackson Atlanta International Airport and for other purposes.
And any questions from the airport?
Good morning, Mr. Vice Chair. Good morning, City Council Member Bibi Odari, Airport General Manager. This is what we term as a cleanup paper. When we complete a project, if the project is underrunning its budget, once we close the project out, we move that money, that excess money or that leftover money back into the appropriate funding stream. And so we have a number of projects that we completed and totaling $1.9 million so that will be moving back into our fund to fund future projects.
B, we have one rule. When you come up, please introduce yourself.
Council members looking at you very strangely.
Okay. I entertain a motion to, it's been moved properly second. All in favor, please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. This item is favorable. Item number 5, 22-01783. An ordinance by Transportation Committee to amend the fiscal year 2023 Aviation Encumbrance Program Fund budget by adding to anticipations and appropriations in the amount of $569,216,307.0 to reestablish the Aviation Encumbrance Program capacity to fund future projects at Hartsfield Jackson Atlanta International Airport and for other purposes.
So, Council Member, let me take a minute to explain to you what this encumbrance funding is, because this has always generated a lot of questions. So in the past, Aviation Department was authorized legislative authorization to encumber, or what we call have an encumbrance program of up to $2 billion, right? Physically, there is no money in this encumbrance bucket. For example, if you go to the bank and said, what am I eligible for to purchase a house? The bank will say, you're eligible for $500,000. Or, doesn't mean that you have $500,000. You're just eligible. So we have authorization to spend up to $2 billion in this encumbrance program. So it gives us legislative authority to bring a project forward, because we know that we can afford the program, because based on our financial modeling and stuff like that, we could afford to bring this project forward for legislative approval and then an appropriate funding stream. We do not want to encumber $2 billion of our money, because we're losing a lot of interest. So what we do is we go out to the market. Phase 2 is for a commercial paper. So we bring a project to you and said, this project is $100 million. And we will fund it, that part that is GARB funded, general airline revenue funded, we go out for a commercial paper and we fund it via that commercial paper. Other streams of funding we use, such as PFC and grant, could apply to the project. When the project is completed and we move into beneficial occupancy of that project, then we go for permanent funding via bond. And once we go out to permanent funding, and then we apply that into the airline rates and charges to refund or to pay for that project, that portion that is GARB funding. So as we bring forth project on the $2 billion encumbrance, we subtract from the $2 billion. We're at a point right now where you want to take the level back up to $2 billion because of the number of projects that will be coming forward. I hope this is as clear as mud to you, but I'm sure that at least you have some clarity on that explanation. So we are asking to approve $69 million to bring us back to that $2 billion encumbrance level.
Thank you, B. Mr. Wong, you have a question?
Thank you. All right, so I'm getting a little confused here, because I think I was following you up until the point where you said when we take basically ownership and occupancy of and the project is complete, then we're sweeping the money back in. Was that a correct interpretation of what you said?
It's a permanent funding at that stage. We go out for a bond to the bond market, and let's say we spend $100 million in a commercial paper for a project. When we go for permanent funding, the bond, that $100 million goes into the airport rates and charges, and we take that $100 million and we pay and we defease the commercial paper amount.
So the trigger isn't necessarily that the project is complete and that we've gotten into the space. The trigger is that we found funding for it, or that. Okay, so let me go back to. Let me just go ask my question. What struck me is that we were going back to May of 2021 for the first project, and then there's one of August of 2022. So I was like, why? What was happening during this whole period? So when you said when the project is complete, that makes sense for the 2021 projects, but it doesn't seem to make sense to me on the August 22 project, which is actually the biggest one, $330 million, that we approved legislation in August and the project's done here, and we're defeasing the financing mechanism. So where's my disconnect?
No, that project was approved. That's T-North extension, right? Yeah, that project, that's T-North, the $300 million was approved quite some time back. And so now we are at the end stage to complete that project. That project is going to take beneficial occupancy in December of this year. And so what we're doing is when are we going to the bond market to fund that? When are we going to the bond market to fund that?
Not determined yet, but
Okay.
good morning. Brian Benefiel, Deputy General Manager, CFO at the airport. Would you please restate your question?
Yeah, so I'm again trying to understand the timing of, you've aggregated 5 different projects or 5 different ordinances that we passed that I'm assuming was to fund certain projects, dating back to May of 2021 as recently as August of 2022. What struck me is the comment that when the projects are finished and we are occupying the space post-construction, that's when this happens. That triggers the permanent financing so that we sweep the encumbrances back into the full capacity of the $2 billion. I get that for the 2021 projects, but the ones that are on here for 2022, just over 2 months ago, being the largest one, that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that are happening here. Typically, when we use the airport encumbrance program, we utilize that for what B was talking about, projects that are ultimately funded with general airport revenue bonds. Those are the ones that come back in rates and charges. I do believe on this one, we did have a passenger facility charge item that was reimbursed in the bond issuance that we did in June of this year. So really what this is doing is both allowing us to repay commercial paper and increase the airport encumbrance capacity, basically as a follow-up from that bond issuance that we did in the latter part of last fiscal year. I don't know if that gives more clarity to the question you got.
Not really, but I'm going to yield. I'm going to look up the legislation 22-01562. Sure. Maybe there'll be something in the language that helps.
Thank you. Our next speaker, Councilmember Marcy Colley Overstreet.
Thank you. We literally landed on the same page because I can see, on the page on the attachment, we landed on the same one, Councilmember Juan and I can see where the numbers from our 5 ordinances add up to 569 to 16307. And from when you said once what Councilmember Juan was stating was once it's funded, I interpreted what you said as once we see clear to the completion, the funding being cleared to completion. So is it like a technical term for that where where the actual money has to be in place, or is it where we are in the stage of the development where we know that it's funded, fully funded, the project that's in this final ordinance from 810? So we heard the same things, but I interpreted it just a little different.
So I'm going to try to answer that question. I was stepped out of sight, but so you're asking about technical term as far as when a project is complete and how this is funded?
As opposed to, because there's no way this project is complete. So it'll be complete, he said, towards the end of the year, right? So I interpreted what you all were saying as not actual completion of the project, but the funding is unencumbered. It's not, we see free and clear where we could actually place this back to what's the name of this? It's
Aviation Encumbrance Program?
Yeah, encumbrance
Correct.
program.
So I'm going to take a step back. So when we originally created the Aviation Encumbrance Program in 2019, we established the $2 billion. So as we encumber those projects from a budgetary authority perspective, as B had talked about, we reduced that $2 billion down over time, right? So that is utilizing the program. As we get to the point where we are utilizing permanent funding sources, primarily general airport revenue bonds, once we issue those, we're paying ourselves back and reducing our commercial paper. But what we haven't done, and this is what we're doing as part of that process, is increasing that airport aviation encumbrance program back to the $2 billion that allows us to go forward funding projects that are coming down the pipeline over the next 6-12 months going forward. So hopefully that addresses your
It
question.
does, because that's what I am essentially saying, that we see the particular project being at a place where we can actually put that money back.
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
And the other important thing that I'll note is every project that is utilized under the encumbrance program still comes back to this body in the form of the resolution for approval as well, which is
Got
what
it.
you guys have been talking about.
And it just frees up out of the $2 billion more to actually use for a different project.
Correct.
Got it. Thanks.
Thank you, council member. I entertain a motion to approve. It's been moving properly second, moved by Councilmember
Mr. Chair,
Westmoreland.
may you repeat the motion and seconder?
Yep, it's moved by Councilmember Westmoreland, second by Councilmember Marcy Collier Overstreet. All in favor, please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 4 yeas, 0 nays, 1 abstention. This item is favorable. Item number 6, 2201.
Hold on a second, Mr. Vice Chair, I'd like to just make a comment. The reason why I abstained is I did pull up the legislation that is referenced in here, and the numbers aren't ticking and tying for me. So if we could, someone before now and November 7th, let's just sit down and do a reconciliation. I understand what you're saying. I just need to connect the dots. So thank you.
We will do that and bring some more clarity, because still saw the puzzled look on your face. So we'll bring some clarity to it.
Item number 6, 2201-1784, an ordinance by Transportation Committee authorizing the mayor or his designee on behalf of the City of Atlanta to revive the lease agreement with the United States of America Department of Homeland Security, Transportation Security Administration for the lease of city-owned space at 1075 Airport Loop Road, to execute documents to formally acknowledge the city as a landlord under the lease as of February 1st, 2022, and to extend the lease on a month-to-month basis for a period not to exceed 10 months, retroactively effective from March 1st, 2022, through no later than December 31st, 2022, to ratify the lease of the premises from March 1st, 2022 through the execution date of this agreement authorized herein and for other purposes. And the department requests is that this item be held.
Is there anyone that would like to speak on this item?
Our request is to hold is to hold the paper for another cycle.
Thank
we
you.
have some issue that we're working out with the federal government.
Thank you. It's been moving properly second, moved by Councilmember Matt Westmoreland, second by Councilmember Alex Wan. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. This item is held. Item number 7, 2201-1785, an ordinance by Transportation Committee authorizing the mayor's designee on behalf of the Atlanta Department of Transportation to accept a donation from the 3M Company to enter into agreements with the 3M Company for implementation of donation acceptance, to amend the fiscal year 2023 budget by adding to anticipation and appropriations in the amount of $60,000.00, to increase the budget amount authorized for the 3M Equity School Zone project and for other purposes.
Is there anyone that would like to speak to this item?
Yes, good morning, council members. My name is Betty Smoot Madison. I'm with ATL DOT as the Mobility Planning Director. This is a grant from the 3M Company to support our Safe Routes to School program for implementation of school zone and safety signage at several schools, including Cascade Elementary, Heritage Academy, and Frederick Douglass High School. We would appreciate your support for this legislation.
I just had a quick clarifying question. I've been acknowledged. I'll pretend to be acknowledged.
Please, Mr. Dozier.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vice Chair. Just quick question, and I see the schools that are listed here. This is just for signage. This doesn't include any sort of other amenities.
Just signage.
Okay, thank you. That was it. Thank you.
I got a question. So the schools that you read aren't the schools that I see on the paper.
Okay.
I see Cascade Elementary, Heritage Academy, and Crawford Long Middle.
Okay. My apologies. Crawford Long is.
That's my middle school. We're gonna make sure we say that.
I'm sorry.
That's my middle school.
Frederick Douglass was one of our original schools, but we ended up going with Crawford Long.
So you had a question? Okay, so it's been moved by Councilmember Matt Westmoreland. Seconded, I'll give it to the ladies first. Councilmember Marcy Collier Overstreet. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. This item is favorable. Item number 8, 22-01786. An ordinance by Transportation Committee to amend Ordinance 20-01471, adopted by the Atlanta City Council on August 3rd, 2020, and approved per City Charter Section 2-403 on August 12, 2020, for the purpose of revising the dedicated roadway lanes for the exclusive use of transit within the Summerhill Corridor as illustrated in Exhibit B, hereto on behalf of the Department of Transportation, all other parts of this ordinance to remain unchanged and for other purposes.
Is there anyone who would like to speak to this item?
Good morning, council members. John Saxton, Mobility Planning Assistant Director, Atlanta DOT. This is legislation to kind of amend the dedicated lanes or the alignment for the Summerhill BRT corridor that was adopted in 2020. Kind of, as you know, since then, the alignment has changed. It's really just kind of rerouting from Mitchell south on Washington and then over on Memorial. So the alignment that you've seen over the last 18, 24 months is consistent with this. It's really just modifying the code to match up with that revised alignment.
To do a little bit better this time, I want to acknowledge Councilmember Juan, who has a question.
My question is just more, how has this been socialized in the community? Are they aware and supportive of this change?
Yeah, so it's a very slight change just to accommodate the rerouting from, but yes, over the engagement that MARTA has done over the last 18, 24 months, this is kind of showing that new information. So I think the most
I appreciate that. No matter how slight it is, you gotta make sure the community is aware and supportive rather than just making it happen. So thank you.
Certainly. And we recommend your support.
It's been moved and properly second. Moved by Councilmember Juan, seconded by Councilmember, I heard Councilmember Overstreet first, but I'm the chair today. So Councilmember Matt Westmoreland was the seconder.
The vote is open.
Y'all gonna hear this a few more times. I'm telling y'all, apologies be, I just threw it too fast. Need to be.
Will everyone please vote?
It's only my second time all year.
The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. This item is favorable. Item number 9, 22-01798, an ordinance by Councilmember Amir Faroki to amend the due date by which City Council must adopt the preliminary plan for the Moving Atlanta Forward Infrastructure Initiative, City Council discretionary accounts per ordinance 22-0-1369 and for other purposes. The sponsor of the legislation requested that this item be amended to change the due date to March 31st.
It's been moved and properly second. Moved by Councilmember Wand, second by Councilmember Westmoreland. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. This item is amended.
Second.
One moment. The vote is open. The vote is closed. 4 yeas, 1 nay. This item is favorable as amended. This takes us to Section J, Resolutions. Item number 1022R, 4521, a resolution by council members Amir Faroki, Byron D. Amos, Jason H. Winston, Jason Dozier, and Liliana Bakhtiari requesting that the Commissioner of the Atlanta Department of Transportation to amend the administrative regulations for shareable dockless mobility device operators to allow device operation between midnight and 4 o'clock a.m. and for other purposes, and the sponsor requests that this item be held.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. This item is held. Mr. Vice Chair, if there is no objection from the committee, can we take items number 11, 12, 13, 14, and 16 together as a block? These are all for the installation of traffic calming devices.
Seeing none.
Item number 11, 22R, 4524, a resolution by council members Mary Norwood and Alex Wong requesting the mayor or his designee to install traffic calming devices on Glenbrook Drive Northwest between Howell Mill Road Northwest and Radcliffe Drive Northwest and for other purposes. Item number 1222R, 4525, a resolution by council member Andrea L. Boone requesting the mayor or his designee to install traffic calming devices on Delmar Lane Northwest and for other purposes. Item number 1322R, 4526, a resolution by Councilmember Antonio Lewis requesting the mayor or his designee to install traffic calming devices on Grand Avenue Southwest from Cleveland Avenue Southwest and to Old Jonesboro Road Southwest and for other purposes. Item number 1422R, 4527, a resolution by Councilmember Antonio Lewis requesting the mayor or his designee to install traffic calming devices on 3rd Avenue Southwest from Cleveland Avenue Southwest to Old Jonesboro Road Southwest and for other purposes. Item number 1622R, 4530, a resolution by Councilmember Dustin R. Hillis requesting the mayor or his designee to install traffic calming devices on Johnson Road Northwest between Hollywood Road Northwest and River Trail Parkway Northwest in order to reduce speeding and for other purposes.
Move to approve. Second. It's been moved and properly second. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. These items are found favorable. This takes us to item number 15. This item will need to be amended. The amendment removes Thurman Road and adds this to the city limits in the caption and all references of the legislation.
Move to up.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second. Please open the vote.
The vote is open.
Yeah, gotcha.
Will everyone please vote? The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. This item is amended. Item number 15, 22R, 4528, a resolution by Councilmember Antonio Lewis, as amended by Transportation Committee, a resolution requesting the mayor or his designee to install traffic calming devices on Conley Road Southeast from Jonesboro Road Southeast to the city limits and for other purposes.
And move to approval. Been moved and properly second. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. This item is favorable as amended. Item number 1722R4532, a resolution by Councilmember Jason Dozier expressing the City of Atlanta support for the abandonment of the portion of Garnett Street Southwest located between Forsyth Street Southwest and the Garnett Street Mortar Station, to the extent that the Commissioner of the Department of Transportation concludes that the proposed abandonment area is no longer useful or necessary for the public's use and convenience as a public right-of-way, to allow for the proposed abandonment area to be included in the development of adjacent city-owned property at 184 Forsyth Street Southwest for the improvement of the public access to the Garnett MARTA station, to increase the amount of affordable housing constructed at the transit-oriented site, and for other purposes.
Is there anyone to speak to this item?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Morning, council members. My name is Matt Bedsole. I'm Assistant Director in the Office of Housing and Community Development. So we're very excited about this proposal. This is the abandonment of this right-of-way, or resolution to abandon the right-of-way, will help facilitate the redevelopment of city-owned property at 184 Forsyth for affordable housing. Right now, the right-of-way is currently a pedestrian plaza. It's not usable in terms, you can't really access Garnett Street, MARTA station from Forsyth Street because MARTA has closed the staircase. And so part of redevelopment of both the 184 Forsyth property and this abandoned right-of-way will help us to return pedestrian access from Forsyth Street to the Garnett Station Plaza, or Garnett Station Plaza and the Garnett Station, which is Broad Street Plaza. There's a bunch of plazas over there. So this resolution will allow us to transfer the property to Invest Atlanta, to eventually RFP the property as one single assemblage, and to bring back pedestrian access and improve the safety and the quality of public space in South Downtown.
It's been, we have a speaker, Jason Dozier, please.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I feel like I've had the opportunity to speak to these downtown redevelopment papers at every committee that I sit on. So apologies to the general public for having to hear me talk about it again. But I'm just really excited once again to see the city move in this direction. You know, South Downtown has been a giant sea of parking lots for a long time. And I love the fact that not only do we have private developers in CIM and Newport putting skin in the game to redevelop these old parking lots and make something that is worth admiring, but it's also amazing to see the city put skin in the game as well. And so I'm excited to support this not only this paper, but also this initiative, and I want to move approval.
It's been moving properly second by Councilmember Matt Westmoreland. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. This item is favorable. Item number 1822R4579, a resolution by Transportation Committee authorizing the mayor or his designee on behalf of the City of Atlanta to enter into a memorandum of understanding and any necessary agreements with the Federal Transportation Security Administration regarding the acquisition, donation, and provision of associated services and equipment to the TSA related to the domestic terminal main security screening checkpoint at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, and for other purposes.
Is there anything from the Department of Aviation?
BBODR Aviation General Manager. This is an extension of what we already have done on the South Security Checkpoint to convey ownership of the equipment that we're doing right now at the main security checkpoint to the TSA to maintain and operate the systems.
Move approval. Second. Been moving properly second. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. This item is favorable. This takes us to our first held item, item number 26. There is a substitute. Is there a motion? We need a.
It's been moving properly second. Please open the vote.
The vote is open. vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. The substitute is brought before you.
Moving properly second, please open the vote.
The vote is open. Will everyone please vote? The vote is closed. This item has been held in committee. This takes us to item number 33. Our last item for the day, 22R4340. 22R4340, a resolution by Councilmember Mary Norwood to clarify the project scope of the 2015 T-Splash project, Moores Mill Road at West Wesley Road intersection improvements, in order to make it a 3-lane intersection and not a 4-lane intersection, and for other purposes.
Is there anyone here to speak to the item?
The sponsor would like to file this paper.
Moving properly second, please open the vote.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. 5 yeas, 0 nays. This item is filed.
Motion to adjourn.
So,
Can we just leave?
oh yeah, so the committee meeting's adjourned.
Yeah, they've
Been waiting all day to do that.
as soon as they brought forth